In this video, we combine some of the most disturbing cave diving tragedies that happened in Europe that we've covered on this channel so far. From divers who got lost in the silt to divers who made a wrong turn and struggled to find their way out. If you enjoy watching these videos, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more exciting cave diving stories like these. Irrespective of the known fact that cave exploration comes with a high level of risk, some would never stop engaging in the sport. Nature entices them, and they always seek to see it in its full glory and not through the eyes of others. Kiltartan, County Galway, Ireland, is a very unique geological environment that has many underground river systems, sinks, and caves. One of these underground systems is the Polonora Cave. Polonora Cave, which has been graced by the presence of many cave divers and was greatly explored by a diver named Artur Kozlowski, is located in Kiltartan, County Galway, Ireland. The cave is under a large beech tree, which is on John Nolan's farmland. There are many imprints on the steps of Polonora Cave because, in times past, the community filled their pitchers and buckets from the well at this cave. The well never ran out of water, even in seasons when everywhere was dry and there was little or no rain at all. This is because it has a limestone landscape, turlows, and underground streams, which are more susceptible to flooding than drought. 196 feet, 60 meters north of Nolan's farmland, is the entrance of Polonora Cave. The shaft at the entrance of the cave drops thick layers of fine clay that cover the bottom of the cave. Disturbing this portion of the cave by divers causes a complete loss of visibility in this zone, which takes a very long time to settle. The roof is composed of boulder clay and loose rocks. As many shafts have been discovered and explored from their length and depth, there are many others yet to be discovered in this cave. Artur Konrad Kozlowski was born on October 17, 1977, and was a gifted and dedicated cave explorer. Artur, in his lifetime, achieved great success in the exploration of new caves and the connection of different caves together. Breaking the limitations on cave diving depth in Great Britain and Ireland, he reached a depth of 338 feet, 103 meters. In 2006, Artur Kozlowski left Poznan, Poland for Ireland, where he spent his last years before his death in 2011. He was a quantity surveyor in Poland, and he continued his profession in his new environment, where he worked on several projects, most especially the Aviva Stadium and Houston Square developments in Dublin. He also compiled maps for Galway County Council and the National Roads Authority for the M18 motorway, where he worked on its design and development. Artur was a qualified diver, having made 13 warm water dives before he got to Ireland. His interest in underwater diving spiked in Ireland. Despite being an open water diver, he knew that cave diving is not the same as floating gracefully down the water. In caves lie many awful tight corners, many of which are dark and challenging. You have little information about what lies around the next bend. You must figure things out for yourself inside the cave. When you are treading unexplored paths, you can consider yourself on the journey to great discoveries, and of course, expect to get involved in some dangerous maneuvers. That is why it requires a well-trained diver to venture into a cave. Because of this, in 2007, Artur went for cave diving training with Welsh cave diving instructor Martin Farr, one of the best instructors in Ireland. He used Hell Complex, which is part of the Green Holes group of underwater sea caves off Doolin, County Clare, as his training ground when he first began cave diving. Shortly after his training, he started exploring and mapping undiscovered passages, and the first significant breakthrough in cave diving was the first traverse he made between Hell's Kitchen and Robertson's Cave near Reef Complex. Most of the extensions of cave systems in both Ireland and Spain were the work of Artur Kozlowski. The most notable aspect of his work was the extension of the Marble Arch Cave System in County Fermanagh. Artur made diving connections to Prod's Pot Cascades Rising, He doubled the length of the cave system from 2.7 miles, 4.5 kilometers, to 6 miles, 9.5 kilometers. These connections were later connected to the newly established Monastir Sink upper cradle system, which made it wider to the length of 7.1 miles, 11.5 kilometers. This is the longest cave in Northern Ireland. He was not just setting records for the longest cave, he also set another record for the deepest cave in Great Britain and Ireland, whose location is in Pollatumary, which is near Killavally, County Mayo, Ireland, in 2008. The cave system is 338 feet, 103 meters deep. Among his notable achievements in cave exploration is the underwater passage in the notoriously unforgiving cave passages of the Fort region, which is 6.2 miles, 10 kilometers. Another was the discovery and exploration of Polyndra, which is the third deepest sump in Great Britain and Ireland, which is 0.6 miles, 1 kilometer in length, and 269 feet, 82 meters in depth. Artur received an award for cave exploration at the annual Polish Travel and Outdoor Sports held in Gdynia in March 2011. Because of his passion for exploration and diving, his blog is filled with the details of his underwater adventures. Many of his discoveries are published in the journal Irish Speleology, and they are also in Descent magazine. He was an excellent speaker and writer who commanded the respect of everyone in the diving community in Ireland. On his usual adventure of cave exploration, Artur left his home for Kiltartan, County Galway, Ireland, on Saturday, September 3, 2011, to explore Pollinora Cave. He went in the company of two of his friends. They lodged at Tom Nolan's house, as he usually does. Artur had already become like a member of the family because of his regular visits to Kiltartan to explore Pollinora Cave. He had visited this cave more than 16 times. The purpose of Artur's exploration was to discover if he could connect this with the caves of Burren. In that case, it would be the biggest underground cave network in Europe. He began diving on the surface of the cave on Sunday, September 4th, but went underground on Monday, intending to return after 3 hours. When his friends found out that he didn't return after the time he told them he would return, they thought he might have gone far into the cave, entering new systems. They started searching for him when they became afraid of his extended dive. Conor McGrath of the Irish Cave Rescue Organization stated that they hoped to find more airspaces after finding a sizable airspace halfway down the underground cave. The airspace is near the surface, so that gives us hope that the cave may have more similar airspaces and that he is in one of them, Mr. McGrath said before the discovery of Artur's body. The hope of finding him alive was lost after they searched for him vigorously for a few days to no avail. After facing several struggles to find Artur's body, the rescue team sought out the assistance of the UK Dive Rescue Unit. The British rescue team was led by Coventry firefighters Rick Stanton and John Valanthan. The rescue operation was very risky and challenging due to siltation in the cave system, which means very poor visibility. Conflicting reports came as to the recovery of his body. While the neighborhood became perplexed about finding him alive, the cave diver experts let them know that he might not have been able to survive it. They stated that he might have gone too far into the deepest part of the cave. Besides, although they may find his body, they may not be able to bring it back to the surface. The rescue team kept searching different passages and air pockets of the cave. His body was found late in the evening on Friday, September 9th, 4 days after Artur entered the cave. Artur's body was found at the then known limits of the cave, at a depth of 171 feet, 52 meters, and 2,660 feet, 810 meters from the entrance. His body was taken halfway through the cave system. As conditions improved the next day, the recovery of his body through the last 1,300 feet, 400 meters, was completed. His body was later taken for a post-mortem at University Hospital, Galway. Artur's legacy will forever be missed by the Speleology Union of Ireland and other diving communities where he had worked. Even the Kiltartan community also felt the impact of his death because he had been noticed for his frequent visits to the cave. Artur had visited the Polonora cave for exploration more than 16 times before his death on the 5th of September 2011. Artur was known to always push Irish cave diving to its furthest limits. As he said when he was being interviewed by a radio station, "The idea is that I go where others turn back." This is just the truth of his life. Due to his dedication and fearlessness, he was the one who discovered many of the systems of caves in both Ireland and Great Britain. He also made most of the cave extensions, making them longer than usual and connecting caves. The last adventure that led to his death was for this purpose too. In honor of his death, a documentary of his life was filmed titled Riders on the Storm. The film was shown at Trinity College Dublin and University College Galway. There has been a mystery concerning Artur's death because the cause seems unknown. The autopsy report revealed that it wasn't a lack of air because he left for the underground cave with air that could last him for more than 6 hours, and he only planned to spend 3 hours. And when his body was recovered, all his equipment was intact and attached to his body. So what could have taken the life of an experienced diver? No one can tell. Though the sport of cave diving requires extreme mental and physical fitness, Artur was found devoted to it passionately till death. This is an attribute of all successful men. Death is not able to scare them out of their passions. He went as far as surpassing the limits of the man that trained him, Martin Farr, the Welsh cave diving instructor. His discoveries of new caves are his long-standing legacy in the cave diving community. A man who lived his life to impact his community and add value to the world sure deserves some honor. Therefore, in August 2012, Irish Speleology, the Speleological Union of Ireland, set up the Kozlowski Fund in support of the exploration of the original cave in Ireland. This was done in recognition of Artur Kozlowski's contribution to cave diving. A gravestone and plaque were also unveiled to his friends and families that gathered at the 3rd anniversary of Artur's death on September 6, 2014. The plaque was erected at the entrance of Polonora, and the gravestone was set up on his grave in Kiltartan. In 1971, Paul Heinz Esser went on a dive with 3 other trainees, lost his safety line, and drowned while exploring the Porth yr Ogof cave. In 2010, his body was recovered from the cave system after lying underground for nearly 40 years. The Porth yr Ogof cave is located close to Ystrad village, near the southern boundary of the Brecon Beacons National Park, Wales. In 1998, the length of this cave system was measured, resulting in more than 1.4 miles of passages. The cave is on the course of the Afan Metha River, and it has 15 entrances, one of which is the largest entrance in Wales and one of the largest cave entrances in the UK. This entrance, called the main entrance, is as wide as 66 feet and as high as 26 feet. People often prefer to enter the cave through this entrance with either a dry ledge on the left or by diving through the knee-deep river to the center and the right. The tradesman's or workman's entrance is the second most used entrance in this cave system. If you pass through this entrance, one of the passages leads to a mud cavern. Porth yr Ogof has been turned into a cave diving training ground. Almost every place within the cave is filled with water. There's a pool called the White Horse Pool. It was named after the shape of the calcite deposit on the wall at the back. The pool is much deeper, and it has several flooded passages. Most of these flooded passages are on the northern side of Tradesman's Entrance. The Porth yr Ogof cave holds the unfortunate second place for the highest death records in a single cave in the UK or Ireland. Due to strong current and cold water, this cave can be very dangerous. It's claimed the lives of 11 people since 1957, 10 of which happened in the cold, fast-flowing, and 23-foot-deep resurgence pool at the far end of the cave where the Afan Metha resurges. On February 13, 1971, Paul Heinz Esser left for a cave diving exploration at Port Irakogov. Paul was a 21-year-old medical student at Bristol University. He was a skilled open water diver who had been to several springs for open water diving. After some time, he began to develop an interest in cave diving and decided to go for cave diving training. He was doing well in cave diving training and was seen as one of the promising upcoming experts in the cave diving community. Paul went on this exploration with 3 other skilled trainees. They were also at Port Irakogov to practice diving from Tradesman's Entrance to the Rollbowl Chamber, then back to Tradesman's Entrance. Paul planned on entering through Tradesman's Entrance to Rollbowl Chamber, winding in a loose line as he was to exit through the top entrance. This was their dive plan. The night preceding Paul's adventure, he met with John Parker, who was well versed with these cave systems, to tell him more about the cave. Back on September 26, 1970, John Parker explored this cave system, laying a blue tagged line from the top entrance upstream. The line covered about 469 feet into the cave. He hid the belay under the water right inside the top entrance. This was the same line that was still in this cave when Paul went for his exploration of the cave systems. Another line also runs downstream of the 4-way junction. Many loose lines hinder divers during their exploration of the cave. Paul and Lloyd went together to the top entrance in search of John's belay, but couldn't find it. They assumed that it was not seen because Parker had initially hidden it when he laid it. They never knew it had been washed downstream. Paul entered alone through Tradesman's Entrance as planned. He carried with him a single 1,200-liter gas cylinder. He was also carrying a Spartan Titan II valve with a pressure gauge, a knife, a compass, a watch, and an empty line reel for picking up loose line. When he got to Tradesman's Entrance, his diving line got broken, but he amended it with another line of about 10 feet in length. After about 15 minutes, the other 3 divers entered through Tradesman's Entrance. They continued their dive until they reached the Rollbowl Chamber, where they met Paul, who had collected many lines that he wanted to wind on the spare reel. Paul was reeling in a thin line that had no tags. From there, he went upstream. The other 3 divers stayed at the Rollbowl Chamber for some time before they returned to the entrance. The water was very cold. The temperature was about 6 degrees Celsius. While Paul continued his journey upstream from the Rollbowl Chamber, he passed through an oxbow, which has an airspace. He saw a loose line with a blue tag that was across the stream. He took it up and started winding it on his line reel. He began reeling the line starting from the end belayed just inside the top entrance. While winding the line as he went, he mistakenly dropped the guideline he was following, which was supposed to lead him to the base. He continued reeling and followed the line with the blue tag upstream. He had gone far away for about 98 feet before he realized that he had dropped his guideline. So he thought to himself that the blue tag line would lead him to the top entrance where he could come out of the cave. He later dropped the line reel and dashed it. That action was the biggest mistake any diver could make. Now, coupled with the mistake of dropping the guidelines, he also didn't check his air tank to know the amount of air left for him. If he had checked this, he would have started returning to the surface earlier than he did. He later got stranded in the cave looking for a way out, but unfortunately, he couldn't find one. Going through all that stress of trying to find his way out, Paul ran out of air completely and eventually drowned. When he didn't come out as expected, they already knew something had gone wrong, so they called a recovery team to the cave site, but they couldn't retrieve his body from the cave. The recovery team was not able to locate Paul's body. They tried several times to retrieve his body, but all attempts failed because of poor visibility and the water was too risky to dive in. After 39 years, the South and Mid Wales Cave Rescue Team recovered his remains from the cave at the request of his surviving family members. 2 professional divers recovered the body in 2010. Paul's mother had given up on the retrieval of her son's body from this cave. In 2010, after she and her husband, Paul's father, died, the surviving family members called out for help to recover the body. Paul's family members went to the cave site when the recovery operations began. The family undertaker received the body after retrieval for proper burial. He was buried beside his parents' grave. His family lived in Surrey. Every year, some cavers pay a visit of honor to the cave where Paul died. He would have been 60 years old in 2010 when his body was retrieved, but he died at the age of 21 in 1971. A lot has changed in the world of diving. It was quite hard to go on a recovery operation in the 70s because of a lack of adequate technology. Thankfully, the recovery operation was made successful in 2010 with the help of great technological advancement that wasn't available in 1971. On Friday, August 19, 2016, 12 divers went diving in the beautiful underwater caves of Palinuro, Italy. It's a small Italian town located 50 miles southeast of Salerno. Palinuro is a great tourist attraction, particularly during the summer. It has one of the most appreciated seaside resorts of Salento, which is popular for its crystal-clear sea and sandy beaches. There are some stunning caves along the coastline, such as Blue Grotto or Blue Cave and Grotta del Sangue, Blood Cave, which can be explored by cave divers. It's not news that the seabeds and caves off the coast of Palinuro are dangerous and diving them welcomes risks. These seabeds and caves have claimed many divers' lives over the years. Back in 1984, on August 16th, 2 young Friulian underwater speleologists died in the waters of the Calafetente. On June 30th, 2012, another accident was reported in the waters of Palinuro where 4 divers lost their lives. It was believed that the roof of the cave collapsed. Last to mention in the order of time, an incident took place in the area of the Blood Cave, where 4 divers luckily managed to escape. On August 19, 2016, the group of 12 scuba divers went to explore the beauty of the underwater caves of Palinuro. Among them, there were 3 divers: Mauro Camardella, the owner of a local diving center, Mauro Tancredi, a local man, and Silvio Anzola from Milan. They were all experienced scuba divers. Camardella and Tancredi were diving instructors of the best-known diving centers in Palinuro. August 2016. It was a Friday morning when these 3 expert scuba divers were among a group of 12 divers who went diving in the waters of Palinuro. One of the rules of cave diving is to get yourself familiar with the weather conditions right before you go diving, else you might wind up struggling for your life in the middle of the ocean. The dive was all planned and everything was set, from maintaining a guideline to light sources and the rule of thirds for gas management. For those of you who are not familiar with the rule of thirds, listen closely. When cave diving, 1/3 of the total air supply is used for entering the cave. The second third is used for exiting the cave, and the last third is only used in case of emergencies. The dive was supposedly on a wall, immersion in parete, but in this wall are a few cave openings. All of the group members returned safely, except the 3. The 3 missing divers failed to re-emerge after the dive at around 10 a.m. The fellow divers waited for them for quite some time, but to no avail. After a few hours of waiting, the matter got on their nerves. They searched for the 3 divers, but none of the members found them, which left them in chaos. The 3 divers, Mauro Camardella, Silvio Anzola, and Mauro Tancredi, went missing, and there was little hope of finding them. It was surprising because those 3 divers who went missing were highly professional scuba divers. There was no trace of the missing divers. The searches continued throughout the night, but no favorable outcomes were obtained from the search. The negative result weakened any hope of finding them still alive. Now they had no other option but to report the missing divers to the authorities. Fabio Barbieri, a 61-year-old man from Genoa who had been in Palinuro since 1983, was an expert diver and was the first to map the tunnel of the Scaletta. He feared that the 3 missing divers might have been trapped in that tunnel. The tunnel is not a good place for beginners to explore. It extends to a length of 52 feet and has a height of only 4 feet. The complexity of the tunnel brings in huge danger and risk of accidents, which explains why it's not recommended for beginning cave divers. Although the divers were expert scuba divers, many suspect that they were not certified for cave diving. It was anticipated that the 3 perished inside of the cave. According to Fabio, who mapped this hard-to-explore tunnel, there's an air bubble in the cave. but it doesn't sustain life for long. It's assumed that the three divers might have been stuck in the confined and narrow tunnel. It probably took too long for them to escape, and they lost their lives. The Port Authority asked Fabio to dive when the SOS arrived, but he responded in the negative, saying that the water was cloudy, so he couldn't see anything. He explained that tunnel is not at all easy to cross, both due to its narrowness and the muddy bottom. Anything could have happened to the three divers: a technical problem, an illness, or a phase of breathlessness. In the meantime, on various social media platforms, many people expressed their pain and grief over the tragedy at Palinuro. On Camadella's Facebook page, next to the photos posted by his daughter on her brother's 18th birthday, many people expressed their sorrow. There were those who couldn't believe the accident actually took place and admit it just happened. When Violetta talked about Mauro Camardella and Mauro Tancredi as two very serious professionals and two very good people, Pietro expressed his thoughts by saying, "But how can it happen with you only diving in total safety?" The search continued in the affected area, including the waters of Palinuro, the air bubble, and the hamlet of Centola in Salerno. The area where the accident took place operated 5 vessels of the Palinuro Harbor Master's Office, directed by the ship lieutenant Andrea Palma and the Palaio subs of the fire brigade. When the bodies couldn't be found despite the hard work by the rescuers and the authorities, the only option they had was to conduct the reclamation of the tunnel. It was decided during the briefing at the Port Authority to carry out reclamation of the tunnel by rock climbers to recover the divers. Andrea Palma, the ship lieutenant and commander of the Maritime District of Palinuro, was supervising the recovery. Andrea stated that this was a very complex operation, and the inspection of the cavity requires the utmost attention. Meanwhile, a team of psychologists went to the families of the victims to talk to them. Expert divers explained that the wall of the Immersione in Parete must have been the point where the trouble began, as this wall has some openings which lead to a few caves. It was feared that they went into the cave opening of Scaletta, which was 164 feet deep. The Scaletta cave was found blocked with silt, and its inner side had collapsed. The air bubble in the cave is the zone of danger, where no one can stay alive for long. Divers who have explored the narrow tunnel in the past suspected that the 3 missing divers might have been trapped in the silted tunnel. At first, the rescuers lost hope in finding the missing divers, as they couldn't find any traces of them. However, after a 4-hour search, the rescue team located 2 of the 3 divers' bodies, namely Mauro Camardella and Mauro Tancredi. It seemed impossible for the rescuers to get the body of the last diver, Silvio Anzola, out due to the narrowness of the cave passage he got stuck in. However, on Thursday, 6 days after the divers entered the cave, the body of Silvio Anzola, who died in the 164-foot-deep underwater cave of Palinuro, was recovered by the rescue team. Because of the depth of the cave, speleologists from the fire brigade were assisting in efforts to recover the bodies. This was the tragic story about the 3 Italian scuba divers who lost their lives in the waters of Palinuro. Let us know what you think about this incident in the comments section below. Everything she does is with a touch of excellence. She leaves nothing undone until they have satisfied her professional taste. If you're seeking a professional cave explorer, Bonnie Cotier would have been one of the best options available. However, she got into trouble when exploring a Welsh underwater cave complex, as we will see today. You may not be prevented from entering the Pŵl y Cwm cave complex, but Mother Nature already has an access control that discourages most visitors, unless you are a seasoned cave explorer. Pŵl y Cwm cave complex is located in Clydach Gorge near Gilwern, Wales. The cave complex has different tall avens which are linked by tight rifts and low muddy crawls. An aven is a vertical pillar that rises from a cave tunnel and occasionally connects to passageways above. Cave divers visit the cave less frequently because it's located far from the extreme, has muddy and tight passages, and is made up of sharp rocks. Here's a fact about this cave that will shock you. Have you been in a cave whose entrance can only be seen when you are right beside it? You can be sure the restrictions that will be within such a cave will be greater than the ones you encountered at the entrance. This is true of the Pŵl y Cwm cave complex. where the entrance is located under the rock on a small grass ledge. The entrance tube is just the size of a human body, and it leads directly to the top of the first pitch. You have to go through the bottom of the first pitch to enter the first Aven. This has a passage that can be followed back under the pitch, which is at the entrance heading to the surface of the cave. The way to the second Aven, which is 7 feet 2 meters from the ground, is through a rift with a tight squeeze. Then you will make a 33-foot 10-meter crawl to get to a ledge 16 feet 5 meters above the floor of the third Aven. Then you will go through another ledge to the left and climb down 16 feet 5 meters with a knotted rope to enter the fourth Aven, which is large and impressive. As you progress through the Aven, you will encounter a lot of sticky mud. Afterward, you can then proceed to the fifth and sixth Aven through many hurdles. Bonnie Cotier, a 52-year-old American native of Washington, D.C., was a creative director and instructor who has worked with different businesses and agencies in Washington. She graduated from the University of Maryland after her college days at Hawthorne School. Bonnie Cotier was married to Steve Francis Hubin, who is also a cave explorer. They both lived in St. Newts, Cambridgeshire. She moved together with her family to different countries, which included Germany, Tampa, Florida, and the United Kingdom in June 2009. Though many couples have different passions and they pursue them separately, the case of Bonnie and Steve was different. Both partners had a lot in common, and they both shared their passion for diving. They both went for cave diving training and were qualified for international cave diving. They both had journeyed to France, Mexico, and the United States for diving adventures. It's more enjoyable to have your partner dive with you. However, Steve was absent on the last adventure Bonnie embarked on. The reason for his unavoidable absence was that he had some commitments at work. He didn't only love diving, but the journey to and from cave sites was always pleasurable for him. They both began scuba diving in 1999 and later moved to cave diving. Because of Steve's work at RAF Molesworth, they both moved to Huntingdonshire. Bonnie was also a member of the Huntingdonshire-based Inspired Group. This is a group dedicated to motivating people who are venturing into their businesses. She was always full of life and commanded the respect of everyone around her. Any opportunity people had to talk with her, they were always grateful for the amazing words she spoke to them. She was honest and straight-talking. Bonnie was a renowned member of the cave diving community and also had her own design company, Golden Dog Corporate Communications. She was both a member and great supporter of a networking group for Cambridge-based businesses, Cam Creative. Bonnie was always friends with everyone she met, and her life inspired people around her. On April 23, 2011, Bonnie Cotier went for a dive at the Poolacombe Complex with Martin Farr, a Welsh diving instructor who was not just a professional diving instructor, but also had many years of experience, as he had been diving for over 40 years. He met Bonnie, a fellow diver, at a meeting in Yorkshire and made arrangements for himself and Bonnie to accompany Duncan Price on his diving research at the Poolacombe Caves. His aim in diving was to take photos of a restricted part of the cave, which is located about 49 feet 15 meters away from the entrance. In this cave, a guideline was placed 82 feet 25 meters into the cave to prevent inexperienced divers from diving farther into the cave because it was dangerous. The air cylinders of these 3 divers had enough air for them to dive for 45 minutes. When they began diving, they were going according to the laid-down plan. Martin and Bonnie, who were standing close to the entrance, helped as photography assistants to take the required photographs by Duncan in the restricted part of the cave, which was the purpose of the visit. Duncan, engrossed in the research and cave mapping, dove further, leaving behind Martin and Bonnie. At the entrance restricted site, Martin attached another guideline to the permanent guideline for Bonnie to be able to go through the restriction and enjoy her dive around the cave, as it was her first time in this cave. 45 minutes into the dive, Bonnie was not yet at the surface. This became a concern to Martin, who quickly rushed into the cave, not minding that he was running low on air. Getting into the cave, he found Bonnie alive at a short distance from the main guideline. He quickly caught her by the harness and drew her forward. Suddenly, Bonnie broke away from his hand and headed in the wrong direction. Martin hurriedly returned to the surface to call for the assistance of his diving partner to help him bring air from his house, which was 6 miles 10 kilometers away from the cave complex. Also, emergency services were called in addition to the air he requested. On getting back, Duncan dove into the cave again in search of Bonnie. But unfortunately, when he found her body, it was hanging vertically in the water. Her 2 7-liter air cylinders were empty when they checked, and she was no longer wearing her regulator in her mouth. Though there was a diving line around her waist, it could have been cut by Bonnie to free herself. There might have been a possible entanglement that would have hindered her from returning to the entrance. Bonnie Cotier's death was confirmed by Dr. Grant Evans, a pathologist, to be a result of drowning. You might be thinking that she went too far. However, Bonnie, who had been qualified for international cave diving, didn't dive beyond her capabilities, only that the cave was new to her. She was an experienced cave diver who did not need a connecting guideline with her diving partners, which was a required standard of international diving practice. What could have caused the death of an experienced cave diver in a new cave? It wasn't the malfunctioning of any of her equipment, nor was it injuries. It must have been that she lost her way to the exit of the cave since she wasn't familiar with the cave. It is clear that she missed her way, but what could have made a professional miss the guideline inside the cave that eventually cost her life? After much struggle to find her way, coupled with running out of air, she drowned and died. This wasn't new to cave divers, who are always on a risky adventure exploring caves, both new and those they are used to. Cave divers have mainly 2 options while diving, either to come out safely or die in the pursuit of their dreams. But they wouldn't allow this fear to stop them. Bonnie Cotier will be deeply missed by her best diving partner and loving husband, Steve Francis Houben. They had both shared diving passions together, traveling to various countries for different diving adventures. She will forever be remembered for her activeness and passion for so many things, aside from cave exploration. In 1974, Roger Solari went on an exploration into Oganathwath Cave together with his friend Martin Farr. They were both experienced divers, but pushed the limits too far as Roger encountered an unfortunate incident. Are you enjoying our cave diving videos but have not subscribed yet? Please consider subscribing to our channel. Ogof Oganathwath, also known as Oganathwath, is one of the longest cave systems in Wales. In 2005, some divers explored Oganathwath to map out the elusive connection that leads to Darren Kilau. They started digging the inlet, during which they uncovered about 984 feet of passageway in the system. The passageway is so beautiful, ending with the corkscrew chamber. The passageways of the cave are more than 20.2 miles in length. When you're entering the cave, you will pass through the short series at the entrance, then to the first boulder choke. There are other round passages that you can explore within the cave. You'll need to crawl when you first enter the cave's long entrance passageways till you get to the large passageways that are easily accessible even without any special diving equipment. One of the round trips is the Grand Circle. It's towards the mainstream passageway and it has 4 boulder chokes. These are passages that are blocked out by rocks. Another round passage that is within the Oganathwath is the long, damp, and exhausting Southern Stream Passage. You can also explore the outer and inner circles within the cave. One of them is the Turkey Stream Way. It's an amazing stream with pools. If you want to explore those round passages, be ready to spend about 6 hours on each. And mind you, those areas are prone to flooding. You'll need to take caution if your adventure is during the rainy season. The waterway at the third boulder choke is most of the time occupied with water, and when there's an extreme flood, you cannot pass it to the second boulder choke. The confined section of Turkey Stream Way that is beyond the northwest junction also becomes inaccessible during heavy floods. Brian Price and his partners were the first to investigate the cave in 1949. In 1950, David Seagrove and Harold Hicken found their way into the passageways. They kept exploring till they got to the first boulder choke. In 1957, the Hereford Caving Club took the exploration further by breaking the first boulder choke that had prevented them from accessing the main part of the cave. John Parker, Jeff Phillips, and some others explored the Oggenothweth cave systems in 1971 and 1972. In 1972, John and Jeff discovered 1,969 feet of a new passageway. They had just added another 1,476 feet to the extension of the passageway downstream of those sumps previously discovered. But John lost interest in this exploration, so he slacked off. From the point where he stopped his exploration at Ogenothweth, Martin Farr, who had been inspired by the series of past diving adventures of Parker, took it up. Martin began exploring the cave in 1973. And in 1974, he and Roger Solari went together for the longest cave exploration during that time. It was on this adventure that Roger encountered the unfortunate incident. Roger Solari, without a doubt, you could call him one of the most gifted cavemen in Great Britain. He had undertaken several dives in different places, including Yorkshire, South Wales, and Ireland. He was a dedicated and rugged man when it came to cave diving. Roger was an introvert by nature, but he was still popular and well-respected wherever he went. He considered nothing too difficult to achieve, and he was always found pushing through to success. He was just 12 years of age when he began diving in his homeland, the Forest of Dean. He became so familiar with this forest due to his continuous exploration. Its secrets and geology were known to him. He began his academic research on the Forest Master System. His goal was to write about different caves and mines found within this forest region. He attended Birmingham University, where he graduated with good honors in physics. Roger was the president of the Speleological Society at his school. He created the Cave Project Group and was also a member of the Forest Rescue Association. On Saturday, June 15, 1974, Roger Solari entered the Ogenothweth Cave together with Martin Farr. Martin Farr was a leading exploratory cave diver and caver. He is one of the world's most famous divers who has gained so much popularity in the cave diving community because of his tremendous discoveries in cave diving. Roger and Martin were going to explore and extend the passages of Ogenothweth Cave to continue from the place where John Parker, one of the best divers, had stopped. Remember that in 1972, John Parker and Jeff Phillips discovered 1,476 feet more passageway length than the previous length, making up 1,969 feet of new passageway length. 1 month before their dive, Martin already dove into this cave system. Unfortunately, Roger wasn't able to come because he injured his knee. During this exploration, he reached the point where John Parker left his exploration, and he was very excited because he discovered a huge passage that led into the darkness. He raced down the passage to find out where it led to. According to Martin, it was a passage which all cave divers dreamt of finding. Unfortunately, he couldn't continue his exploration on this day because he didn't have enough air in his tanks. 1 month later, in June 1974, Roger and Martin were about to start a long exploration. They were going to dive into the downward stream sump 4 in the main stream. Each of them came with 3 air cylinders, a pair of boots, and a line reel. Everything went really well until they reached sump 4. Roger was the one leading the dive, while Martin was following closely. Roger had a line reel of 400 feet with him. He had been laying line with it. Martin, on the other hand, had a 1,000-foot reel. During the dive, Roger indicated that he had difficulties with his sinuses. However, Roger was not new to the kind of difficulties he was experiencing. He had similar issues while diving in the past. This adventure was just like one of those difficult ones he had experienced before. Martin indicated that Roger should head back when it was not resolving. Roger and Martin were diving together, but independently. That is, any of them could decide to return to the surface anytime they wanted to. That was part of their diving plan. Roger was very determined to continue the exploration because he was very interested in it. When Roger's line ran out about 400 feet into the sump, it was obvious they had reached a depth of 50 to 60 feet, and the passage was further descending. Martin checked his pressure gauge and saw that he almost reached his first third limit of air, but decided that he would carry on. He knew that Roger had a little bit less air in his tanks, and they communicated underwater that Martin was going to continue alone and Roger should head back. Martin carried on the passage that was going deeper. About 150 feet later, just when he knew he should return to the surface, he noticed a gravel bank that had a steep upward slope. At this point, Martin checked his pressure gauge, only to find out that he was already well into his second third of air. Despite this, he ascended this slope, assuming there would be an air pocket where he could breathe for a second. He went higher and higher and was at about 3 feet in depth, just under the water surface, but discovered there was no airspace there. At this point, Martin only had a half bottle of air left that he had to use to get out of the cave. This time, Martin had pushed the limits really hard and quickly made his way out. While going out, he saw Roger at the roof of the passage at 3 feet depth. Martin signaled to him that it was time for them to return to the surface. Martin dropped his reel at one side while Roger held on to his line. They needed to get out because they were both desperately low on air. Martin reached the deepest point and started to go back along the tunnel. However, because of his fast rate of ascent, he suffered from acute pain in his ears. While he cleared his ears, he waited on the line for a few minutes, but Roger wasn't showing up. Martin realized that he didn't have enough air to go back into the tunnel and search for Roger, so he went ahead back to the surface. Martin felt a great relief when he got to the surface. He waited for some time, thinking that Roger would return to the surface too, but he didn't. He began to wonder what could have happened to him. He became uncomfortable, but there was little he could do. He was running out of air. This was the major reason why he could not wait for Roger while in the cave, and what any professional diver should do. But now that he was out of the cave and Roger was yet to return, he had to take the risk of returning to the cave with his air reserve. He got back into the cave. He began to pull the line, but it was slack. When he went about 430 feet further, but still experienced the same thing, he discovered that the line had been cut at about 30 feet after the point where the lines were joined. At this point, Martin didn't have sufficient air. It was no longer safe for him. So he returned to the surface and waited endlessly for Roger to return. When John Elliott and his friends returned that night from their 9-hour dive nearby, they met Martin, who told them that Roger was yet to return from the fourth sump. Immediately, they reported the situation to the police and the cave rescue team. John Parker was also called. He was one of the best available during this incident. On Sunday evening, they attempted to dive to recover Roger's body, but were hampered by poor visibility caused by heavy rainfall in South Wales. They were there all through the night, but later suspended the search when they could not see him. They waited for a few days. The following Thursday, they returned to Oggenathwath. The search team consisted of 10 divers, including John Elliott, John Parker, and Colin Edmond, a diver who was from that region. This time around, they were going to the terminal sump where they last saw Roger. They took it upon themselves to search out the body and bring it back to the surface. John Parker and Colin Edmond went into the cave while others waited at the surface. After a while, Colin returned to the surface after reaching the third sump, reporting that the visibility was still very poor. Parker continued the search alone. Parker had 4 air cylinders with him for the dive. He had gotten to the fourth sump and had laid more than 500 feet of line, though he was still diving in poor visibility. With all his efforts, Roger's body was nowhere to be found. Parker also returned to the surface. It was just about 3.5 hours after Colin surfaced. The 10 divers all had a brief meeting and concluded that the search should be called off to avoid further risks. They had spent 10.5 hours in a fruitless search for a deer diving partner, Roger Solari. Unfortunately, they could not retrieve Roger's body from Oganathwath, and what had happened to him within the cave became a mystery to the cave diving community to date. One might think that he had been entangled, and that's why he cut the line for the reel. All his diving buddies and the members of his cave community in South Wales, Yorkshire, and Ireland, where he had dived before, would sincerely miss the cheerful heart of Roger Solari. The last story of this Europe Special Cave Diving Marathon is a tragic incident involving a Czech diver who was found underwater with a knife protruding from his chest. Was it homicide or suicide? Stay tuned till the end as we unravel his story. On the 10th of September 2002, a group of divers and 2 dive instructors went on an adventure at Poganica Bay. Poganica Bay is located in the southern part of the island of Solta, in the Croatian Middle Adriatic. Poganica Bay has an underwater cave system with a funnel-shaped entrance that is about 30 feet in diameter. As you go deeper, you'll discover that the cave is wider than it looks at the entrance. When you dive beyond 49 feet, you'll see the point of connection between the 2 galleries, the shallow and the deep gallery. The beauty of this underwater cave is that it has no underwater current. Poganica Bay is a popular diving site for many divers, and despite its reputation as a dangerous and deadly cave, many divers still find it appealing to enter. The cave is dangerous because of 2 things. One is that the inner part of the cave is covered with fine silt, which can lead to a reduction in visibility within the cave when disturbed. Even when using a high-power flashlight, it's really difficult to see your surroundings. In addition, the passages between the shallow gallery and the deep gallery are complex and confusing, making it extremely difficult to find the exit of the cave. The group of divers sailed out with the tourist boat Domino. This diving team consisted of both experienced and inexperienced divers. Miroslav Kuklish, a 31-year-old man from the Czech Republic, a cook by profession, and the subject of this story is one of the most experienced divers among them. They were all on board at Poganica Bay preparing dinner. Meanwhile, Miroslav dove into the water and discovered the entrance to the cave, while others stayed on board to prepare their dinner. This team of divers came for this adventure because they'd heard about the cave inside Poganica Bay. Though they have no idea what it looks like, they were curious about the adventure. When Miroslav returned to the boat, he told his diving team that he had discovered the cave's entrance. So while they took their dinner, they deliberated on how to go about their dive that very night. But not all of them were interested in diving exploration because they were not fully sure of where the entrance that Miroslav had seen led to. Some assumed it to be a shallow pit, while others felt it might have been an entrance to a cavern. They continued their deliberations until the end of their dinner. So after dinner, it was already 9 p.m. The ship captain took a nap, and 4 of the divers on board went into the water. They paired themselves into 2. Each pair had a dive instructor and a less experienced diver. During the dive, Miroslav took a leisurely dive and was watching the course of action from a distance. Leisure diving is a diving activity in which the diver strikes a stunningly relaxed pose in midair while he jumps into the water body. These 2 teams that entered the water dove down into the cave, and not long after, they descended into a tunnel. After entering the tunnel, they discovered that it is a broad cave system, and they were not prepared to enter such a deep and complex cave at the moment, so they exited the cave and came to the surface. They resorted to spending a few minutes enjoying night diving while they watched fish and octopuses in the water. After this, they returned to the boat. On getting to the boat, their friends who were on board told them that Miroslav hadn't surfaced. It was already 10:30 p.m. and 2 hours after they got into the water. They assumed Miroslav had changed his dive plan without informing anyone about it. They thought maybe he decided to join them at the deep gallery without knowing they had left for shallow water, since they discovered the depth of the gallery was too deep. They waited a few more minutes for him to return. At 10:46 p.m., a dive instructor and another diver re-entered the water to search for Miroslav. The 2 divers entered the water with a flashlight and a safety line to descend into the cave and went as far as they could risk doing. They searched through the cave but couldn't find Miroslav. At this time, they were sure that his cylinder would run out anytime soon, and he was still under the water. Out of fear for what might have happened to Miroslav, they decided to call the police. The police told them to relax and remain where they were, and that trained police divers would be sent to them the following morning. So they anchored the boat at Poganica Bay, above the entrance to the cave. It was a sleepless night for them because of their distress. By 8 a.m. the following morning, the police had divers arrive at the location to commence the search operation. 2 police divers descended into the water for the search operation. After about an hour and 30 minutes, one of the police divers returned to the surface. He was in great agony and had symptoms of decompression sickness because he made a rapid ascent to the surface from the cave. He was then rushed to the hospital. The second police diver that went for the search operation never returned to the surface. The following day, some other teams were called to the location to continue with the search for the missing diver and the police diver who couldn't emerge to the surface the previous day. This time around, the search team came more prepared than the first team. The team dove into the water to commence the search operation. They saw the body of the police diver, Bernard Magique, 27 years old, at a depth of 78 feet in the shallow gallery. It was as if he got lost and disoriented after letting go of his safety line. He had likely run out of oxygen and drowned. When the search team got to a depth of 177 feet, they saw the body of Miroslav in the deep gallery. To their greatest surprise, there was a knife protruding from Miroslav's chest. They pulled out the knife while trying to remove his diving gear at the bottom of the cave, so they brought the bodies of the 2 divers to the surface. While investigating the knife protrusion in the chest of Miroslav, they assumed that he might have been murdered, and not that he got lost and drowned as they earlier thought. Due to this assumption, the suspicion of who had murdered Miroslav fell on his friends and fellow divers because they were on board together on the night of the incident. They were all subjected to a polygraph test. A polygraph test is a procedure used to measure and record many physiological indicators, such as blood pressure, pulse, respiration, skin, and conductivity of suspects while they're answering the questions they're being asked. 2 of his friends had a strong reaction to the words knife and blood. This was considered strong evidence, so they were taken into custody. After this, they began the investigation. Miroslav's equipment was analyzed and found to be working properly, so equipment malfunction was ruled out as the cause of his death. When they checked his dive computer, it was functioning properly too. There was no evidence that the dive computer had been meddled with, and the data they found in it was used to analyze his last dive. From the data, they found that Miroslav dove straight down to a depth of 165 feet, which shows that he entered the deep gallery. Miroslav began ascending not too long after he got into the deep gallery, so they deduced that he might have lost his way to the exit. While he was seeking a way out, he mistakenly entered the shallow gallery. Maybe he was thinking that it was the exit. Some of the divers that were conversant with this cave system said that it is a likely possible mistake because the entrance to the shallow gallery looks like the exit, and the rescue policeman who went missing must have made a similar mistake after he left his safety line. For about 35 minutes, Miroslav was still searching for the exit and later got lost in the deep gallery again. Finding himself in the deep gallery, he stood still for about 5 minutes. Maybe he was using that time to relax, or he was taking advantage of the air pocket at the top of the cave. Supposedly, Miroslav could not control his buoyancy again, and he dropped down to the base of the gallery. They affirmed that he was stabbed when he got to the base of the gallery. By considering this sequence of actions that were discovered from the dive computer, the police figured out the likely ways the suspects could have murdered Miroslav. First, they assumed that Miroslav could have been stabbed while they were still in the boat and was now taken to deep gallery for a cover-up. That couldn't happen because it would be impossible for the murderers to falsely order Miroslav's movement, which was seen on his dive computer. And they couldn't have still returned to the boat in time without serious decompression sickness. The second assumption stated that one of his diving buddies who first searched for him could have met him at the deep gallery and stabbed Miroslav with his knife. This couldn't be. The dive computer showed that he was already dead at the time his 2 diving buddies went to search for him. So the assumption that Miroslav was killed by his friends became less likely as they considered all these options. The timing and data collected from the dive computer don't show that Miroslav was murdered by anyone. The only option they could consider, after eliminating possible murder, was that Miroslav could have stabbed himself with his diving knife, but this option was being contemplated. So some military divers were consulted by the police, and they explained that they, as military divers, do everything possible to survive in any situation they find themselves in. Anyway, Miroslav was just a cook and not a military man. He only went diving because it was one of his hobbies. Perhaps being alone in the deep gallery and losing hope of being rescued at that late hour might have led him to take such a decision. He might not have wanted to face the pain of drowning, and the only option to escape the painful death and end his own life as fast as possible was to use his dive knife to stab himself. A dive knife is used by divers to cut lines in case of entanglements. After all these investigations, Miroslav's friends were released from custody without any further charges against them. They returned home without their friend Miroslav, with whom they had started the adventure. It was a sudden loss for them. This was the fourth cave diving marathon on this channel. Let us know what you think in the comments section. If you enjoyed watching, take a dive on the like and subscribe buttons and hit the bell icon so you get notified when we come back with another exciting cave diving story.